Hello and welcome everyone to the virtual Edelweiss Emerging Ideas Conference. I'm pleased to kick off the first session of the conference, a subject that has undeniably played a vital role in shaping India's growth and employment story, particularly the rural one. Yes, in the next 1 hour, we'll be discussing the evolution of agriculture and rural sector over the years, the achievements, the issues, and of course, the opportunities ahead. As the economy grapples with COVID shocks, the rural resilience led by agriculture is categorically shining out, and possibly will be the only sector this year which would add positive impulse to growth. However, there are still questions about the sustainability of sector's growth beyond the near term, as the structural issues still constrain the full potential of the sector. To discuss this and more, we are joined by Dr. Ashok Gulati, a name to reckon with when it comes to agriculture economics. Dr. Gulati is the Infosys Chair Professor for Agriculture at ICRIAR. He is currently also on the Central Board of Directors of the Reserve Bank, NABARD, and NCTEX. He's been deeply involved in public policy analysis and advisory pertinent to the sector. He was the youngest member of the Economic Advisory Council of PM Atal Bihari Vajpayee's era and was also the member of planning boards of various state governments. For his contribution to the field, he was honored Padma Shri Award in 2015. He has over 14 books to his credit on the sector, besides numerous research papers in national and international journals. And of course, he's a regular feature in print and television media. We are excited and privileged to host you, sir, today. Over to you now.
Thank you very much, Madhvi, and the investor community. It's a privilege for me to be here and sharing some of my thoughts with you on the issues related to agriculture and rural economy. Let me kick off this by the good news that despite the COVID, the production of food grains, which is the basic food security of the country, has been a record crop, 295.6 million tons or so. And the procurement was also a record of wheat, about 39 million tons, which we have never done. And in June, when the procurement was getting over, first time India had food grains stocks with the government agencies, FCI and others, at 97 million tons against a buffer stock norm of 41 million tons. So one thing is very clear, that there is more than ample food, at least in the system, and therefore there should not be any starvation, deaths, or any other problem on food security front. And this is a remarkable achievement, I would say, how the procurement was done when there was a lockdown in the country, literally. There are states like Punjab and Madhya Pradesh and Haryana who need to be congratulated for that, the way they managed it. Having said that, let me also say that there is a good news. As the new season, Kharif season started, the sowing of the new season was much higher than the last year, for example, and fertilizer sales were way above 30%, 35% above last year at that time. And now you are hearing tractor sales in July are about 38% higher than July of last year. Now, all these are very upbeat signs in an otherwise economy which, except the health sector, I think in most of the sectors it's going to be negative. Now, if this is the mood of the nation, can agriculture and rural economy be a savior, at least in 2021, holding the fort and not letting the economy go down dramatically? One reason I'm quite hopeful is that when you are at home and not going to offices or not going to weddings or other parties, besides your work, what is the other place that you visit most frequently? And you would find unconsciously you go to your kitchen to graze something after every 2 hours, 3 hours. There is a continuous demand for food. So whereas in the rest of the economy, the demand is tanking, the demand for food may go down a little bit because parties are not there, but the stomachs are there. and they will continuously need every day. And I can bet you, if you look at your household consumption, that is more than the normal what you had been having. And that's one thing. On the supply side, we are quite comfortable. On the demand side, it's not going to be a collapse of demand, and therefore the economy on the agriculture front is going to be performing reasonably well. Now, what is that reasonably well? Agriculture never performs by 8%, 10%, 12%. Our long-term rate of growth in agriculture is about 3.1, 3.2%. And some estimates have come that it may be 2.5. Government is saying, no, it will be 3%, and so on and so forth. So anywhere 2.5 to 3.5, I would say that is where agriculture is going to be. Now, one or two things more in this agriculture scenario that I want to say, because while I feel very proud that there are no starvation deaths and there is ample supplies on the food front, demand is continuously there. But I think as a country, and you and me all have failed in protecting the migrant problem. When they started going back, the reverse migration from Mumbai and Delhi and Surat and all those places to Bihar and UP, and that was something, a pathetic scene, and I think India was not ready for it. We have to find better answers to it, whether they will come back or half of them will come back to kickstart the construction activities in these mega cities. But when they are back, the news that we are getting is that their income levels, because these were somewhat better skilled persons who were working in metro cities, and they will not be really ready to go into Manrega unless they are driven to the wall and to destitution. And therefore, the income levels of these migrants and the remittances from the urban areas to rural areas have come down. So this will be a little dampening effect on the overall demand coming from the rural economy. But since these people are there, more population, minimum they will have to eat something and demand something. So don't get misled by tractor demand of 38% that, okay, now everything is booming. I would say temper that a little bit down, but not going into negative, that is for sure. And hopefully this will hold the fort. So overall, where 42% of the workforce is the agriculture sector, and it contributes roughly about 16-17% to the overall GDP, is going to be performing more or less normal as it used to perform in the long-term growth story. That is the good news, reasonably good news, I would say, and it will hold the demand. Another thing that I would like to say is what the government has done. And this is where crisis brings innovation and reforms. You remember the 1991 crisis, foreign exchange crisis, we had only $1.1 billion in our pocket at that time, and we ushered in a new era of reforms, and today we have $520 billion, which has given resilience to the country. Same thing during this COVID period when the country was in lockdown condition. They removed many of the restrictions on the marketing of the produce to keep the supply lines alive. And those changes, the ordinances that have come, are actually what was being experimented during the lockdown period. Essential Commodities Act was amended, and farmers can sell outside the APMC mandis. Contract farming is encouraged. Now, these will bring very rich results in the medium to long run, because this is what was needed, unshackling of Bharat, I would say, or unshackling of Indian farmer who was bonded towards the APMC markets. On August 9th, the Prime Minister announced Agriculture Infrastructure Fund also of 1 lakh crores to take care of the post-harvest storage and processing activities anchored basically at the FPO level, although individual entrepreneurs can also take advantage of that. Now, these two things, the legal changes and the monetary liquidity that is being pumped in the system for creation of post-harvest activities, I think are commendable steps from the government side. And this is where a lot of opportunities for investment for your investors are also there. You know, you can think of a pan-India system of supply line and building silos and logistics around that. This is a major area of investment potential, which was not there earlier because of these legal restrictions that had been put down. So this cleaning up of the legal restrictions and the government giving a direction that we are going to be giving loans to FPOs and others, and NABARD has been entrusted to create 10,000 new FPOs, farmer producer organizations. These are all steps in the right direction, and hopefully I feel that the intermediation cost, as the commodities move from the rural areas to urban areas, that intermediation cost will reduce, price discovery will be better, and farmers will be able to get a higher share of the consumer's rupee. And all this will lead to better competitiveness of Indian agriculture. And if that is there, then hopefully we can also reverse the trend in exports of agricultural commodities, which for the last 5-6 years has not been very healthy. It had been coming down actually after 13-14. So with these words, these are my preliminary introductory remarks. I'm asked for 10 minutes, and over to you, Madhvi.
Thank you so much, sir, for that insightful session. Truly, there's much more than what meets the eye when it comes to a sector. Since you already touched upon the recent policy push, I just wanted to understand the so-called Atmanirbhar theme that the government is currently running on, and the kind of long-standing reforms that they have, taken into consideration. You think they could actually, be adequate to fill the gap for medium-term agriculture and rural sector growth? And especially, would that help in doubling the farm sector income? Because that was the theme of the government, say, 2 years ago. And have we reached anywhere on that front?
Okay, let's first take up your Atmanirbhar Bharat as far as agriculture is concerned, because that's the latest slogan and the theme of the Independence Day speech of the Prime Minister also. Now in agriculture, you would be surprised to know that all these years since literally 91 onwards, and more so from 2000 onwards, Indian agriculture has been a net exporter of agri-produce. The peak was in 13-14, the last year of the UPA government, when our exports of agriculture were about $43 billion and our imports were about $18 billion, giving a net surplus of $25 billion plus. Now, after that, the exports have come down, imports have not come down that much, so the net surplus has reduced. But as on 1920 also, we are still a net surplus in terms of exports, if Atmanirbharta reflects something on the trade front, and as far as our food security needs are concerned, we are very much on a stable wicket. Now our biggest import item, on the export front, we are very diversified. In fact, 1920 is the first time when fish and marine products have pipped even rice. Earlier rice used to be, we are the largest exporter of rice in the world, about 12 million tons. And this time, fish and marine products have gone marginally ahead. The two together are the top runners in terms of exports of agricultural commodity. But exports of agriculture goes from buffalo meat to spices or cotton to all sorts of even fruits and vegetables that's coming up, all those things.
Movie, I think Circa Internet
on
has
the
some issue.
import in imports of edible oil, which are worth $10 billion. In quantity terms, about 15 million. And do Atmanirbharta in that import substitution. We have to have a medium to long-term strategy on the edible oil front. That is the biggest challenge. All other things are within reasonable thing. About your second question of doubling farmers' income. Now, doubling farmers' income, the slogan was given, actually it was a dream that Prime Minister shared on 29th of February 2016, saying that I have a dream that by 2022-23, farmers' income should be doubled. He never said real or nominal income, but later on in April, there was a committee set up under Ashok Gulati, and they wrote 14 volumes how to do it, and they said it's not nominal, it is real.
Right.
Now, to tell you frankly, my assessment on that, by 2022-23, they will not reach even the half of that target. Most likely, they'll be about 40% of their target. Because that required, more than 7% rate of growth, 10% rate of growth over 7 years. That's not possible in agriculture. We are having a much lower, 1/3 the targeted rate of growth. So instead of 10.4, we are having about 3.1, 3.2 roughly. So I'm sorry to disappoint you on doubling of farmers' income. That's not going to happen by 2022-23. But if you switch the target to 2030, you will hopefully get that. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Another question that sort of intrigues me is the MSP addiction. I mean, so-called price incentives that the governments have created, have they actually had any medium-term benefit for the sector? Because, what you've really seen in the MSP segment is that it has raised the retail prices rather than actually improving the farm investment, and actually created a very skewed crop production scenario. And most importantly, the ecological unsustainable farming practices that the country is currently facing. Do you think that, what is the way forward on this front? And of course, if we suddenly withdraw the MSP policy, it could probably create a lot of disruption and disincentive for the sector. So what is the way out? I mean, it's just an addiction that is having a negative loop effect rather than actually increasing the investment in the sector.
Well, I would say MSP policy has a positive aspect as well as a negative aspect. So let's first look at the positive side. Now, MSP is announced for 23 commodities on the basis of cost A2 plus FL family labor and 50% return on that. That's the formula now adopted. Now, in reality, MSP policy is primarily applicable in 3 commodities, wheat, rice, where government procures, and in sugarcane, which is FRP, fair and remunerative price, which the sugar mills are forced to pay in a way whether the sugar prices are right or not. The benefit of that is in all the 3 commodities, wheat and rice, you have huge surpluses. Look at the stocks with the government. As I said earlier, your buffer stock norm is 41 million tons and you are having more than 90 million tons in your kitty right now. So it's a 50 million ton extra stock that you're holding. In economic cost terms of FCI, this is about 150,000 crores locked in as unproductive capital. You don't really need it because your buffer stock norm is already taken care of. This is the excess part. But the benefit of this policy was that farmers in Punjab, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh were able to get this MSP, and that's about, when you look at 39 million tons of procurement, it's about 72,000 crores pumped in the system in the farmers' accounts. If that MSP was not there. Market price could not hold at MSP. Market price is hovering below that. So you look at other commodities, mustard or chana or any Rabi commodities, their prices were hovering 10 to 25% below MSP. And there is very little procurement, if at all. So, you know, you cannot wish away the MSP policy overnight. You have to put in some other alternative policy in place. I personally have been suggesting that you move from price policy to an income policy approach. That on per hectare basis, you give to the farmers whatever you want to give, but don't distort the markets too much, because the inefficiency of the markets like this massively excess stocks. It is you and me, our tax money, and when government needs so much of money for defense expenditure and health sector, this is a dead stock buying. If there was any big private sector company of Tatas or any other, they would have failed by now.
Correct.
Over to you.
Yeah. Another thing that I am intrigued to again ask is about the investment in this sector. So what we've really seen is the household sector is a dominant player in the agri investments, and over the last 5-6 years, you have seen that household investments in agriculture is actually plummeting, partly because the terms of trades are not very favorable for them to be really investing in the sector, while public sector is probably looking to be going up in the last 2-3 years at least. How do we ensure that private participants and household, they contribute more to the investment of the sector, because clearly the sector needs more private sector participation as far as improving the potential of rural sector is concerned. What is the way forward for you on that front?
You know, when we talk about investment in agriculture, the UN system of accounts that defines public sector investment primarily. I would say 90% of that is investment in major and medium irrigation schemes.
Right.
Government has done something in that, last 3 years after prioritizing 99 projects, and so that they don't suffer from funds, and massive infusion of capital was given. But to tell you very frankly, in agriculture sector, it is the private sector investment, which is the farmers themselves. 80% plus is the share of farmers in the total investment in agriculture. And out of this, basically, two things they invest on. One is the irrigation pump sets, and the other is the farm machinery. The tractors and other farm implements. That is the primary investment on that. Now, if you take together capital formation in agriculture as a percentage of agri GDP, this was at the peak in 2011-12, it was at 18%. And today, the latest data is actually 17-18, it's about 14%. So it has come down over all these years. Now the capital output ratio, which actually determines at what rate your agriculture can grow, hovers around 4 to 4.5 is to 1. That means you need 4 units of capital to produce 1 unit of GDP in agriculture. Now, if your investment is hovering at about 14% of agri GDP, that means you are not going to get more than 3.5% rate of growth in agriculture. So if you want 4 or 4 plus, then you need to go to 18-20% of agri GDP. And this is where I think some of the reforms that can be brought in, and even the corporates can be invited to invest there by Land Leasing Act. This is something which is still pending, opening up the land lease markets, because the high-end precision agriculture or more of AI and all sorts of revolutionary things that are coming up in agriculture around the world, farmer himself may not be able to, an individual farmer is so small, our holding size is 1.08 hectare. may not have the wherewithal to deal with that. So the corporates have to work very closely with farmer producer organizations, and if the land lease market is open, then there would be scope for investments directly by the corporates also, or in association with the farmer producer organizations. We have to find out how to keep our agriculture competitive and growing at least 4% per annum. This is what the target has been all over, and we have not achieved that. And secondly, it has to be inclusive, because you cannot wish away all the small farmers, and therefore the institutional engineering that you have to do is to bring them through farmer producer organizations and dovetail them with the expertise and technology of the corporate world to give us the best win-win solution for the agriculture sector.
Totally agree. Another question that our clients are interested in understanding is that how to really take care of the labor productivity aspect in agriculture. Clearly, it's a prominent sector from employment point of view. We all know about this so-called disguised unemployment sector, the low labor productivity, the low land productivity, which continues to mar the sector. I think overall it doesn't necessarily augur well for the demand dynamics also if you are, even though you're employed and not necessarily paid very well, or you are underpaid, or you are into a disguised employment mode. Do you think that agri marketing and value chain could actually create jobs out of agri to a non-agri sector and probably add more value to the overall labor market in general? Because clearly you can't necessarily really see productivity on that front. I mean, how much can Bharat really support the so-called India's workforce at this point in time? Agriculture needs, one needs to diversify out of agri to non-agri in the rural segment to really create, quality employment in the economy. So what is your thought on that front?
You have raised a very important and relevant question, that the mindset of our policy makers need to shift from raising productivity per hectare to two things. One, raising productivity per unit of water, per cubic meter of water, what it is, and then per unit of labor, because the prosperity in agriculture will come when the productivity per unit of labor increases. Now, that means you have to raise productivity on per unit of land, but also you have to make people shift away from agriculture. There are too many people in agriculture right now, and the world over, the development experience of the last 200 years has shown that people have moved away from agriculture. Our share of agriculture in overall GDP has come down much faster than the share of agriculture in the overall labor force of the country. That is coming down, but coming down very slowly. Now, if you look at the Chinese experience and you want to compete with China, one thing that I learned studying China was, the massive shift of labor force that took place from agriculture, almost 200 million people, they went to construction. The Shanghais and Beijings of this world were constructed by people who were actually in agriculture. And I've been to those places where 15 years back they were agricultural lands, and now they are 40-story posh buildings in the urbanized situation.
Right.
Now, we have to get our land laws more liberal, and our construction sector, luckily, during the UPA period, up to about 11, 12 or 12, 13, was growing at 12%, 13% per annum. And this is where labor was getting shifted from low productivity jobs in agriculture to somewhat higher productivity jobs. Whosoever had little skill of mason, carpenter, electrician, plumber, and all that, they were coming, and all these people. But now, because of certain issues, whatever, the NPAs that are coming, or the RERA regulations, construction sector collapsed literally from 13% to 3%, 4%, 5%. So there is and now during COVID lockdown, it is all grinding halt. And all these people who are engaged in construction sector are pushed back to the rural areas again. So the labor productivity there would go down because more labor has come in. So I think my feeling is Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, for example, building housing for all, or having tapped water for all. These are commendable steps, and they can take rural labor force out of agriculture. But your question was more specifically, can we build agriculture value chains and they can be absorbed nearer their homes?
Right.
This is very critical because rural urban connect that is fixed, and by 2030 there will be 600 million people in urban areas in India, and every year from today onwards we need to construct one Chicago every year. That is the need. Now they will need food, and the food will come from the rural areas. So you need to have a seamless connectivity from the rural areas to urban areas in a manner where both can gain. And that is the art of policy making. How do we do that? Over to you. Over to you.
Yes. So there's one question from our client. He's asking, Mr. Vipul Jain, he's asking if contract farming could actually resolve the issues that the sector is currently facing, because that's one reform that the government also had emphasized on in the recent Atmanirbhar plan. And it's something that probably was taking place, but didn't really, gain much traction. And do you think that the government push now for contract farming could be a good solution to the problem that the sector is facing?
Sure. The new ordinance, which is not called contract farming, but indirectly it says that farmers can directly tie up with processors and exporters and so on and so forth. So that's a step in the right direction. It should not be too imposing. To tell you very frankly, in contract farming, the biggest challenge is what is the price negotiated. Now, you can promise a price. If the market price after 3 months or 4 months when the crop comes is higher than the promised price, farmers go away from you and they go to the market. You can't do anything. And if the market price is lower than the promised price, then all the supplies come to you and you cannot handle those. So there has to be a flexible way of how to fix these prices. But definitely the legal framework and the future, because there is some sort of a hedging of the price risk of the farmer.
Correct.
And it will evolve gradually over a period of time, and we'll see how it succeeds.
Another question that one of our clients is asking, Mr. Shubham, is that whether ENAM actually was a game changer in the agriculture sector. Do you think that online Mandi forum could be a good solution going forward, especially now that we are focusing a lot on digitalization and farmers getting more acquainted to the technology aspect? So I think that's one reform government was pushing for in NDA 1 era. I'm not too sure how much it has really gained traction. I would like to know your thoughts on that front as well.
The numbers that government puts on the table on ENAM, that we have done transactions of 90,000 crores and so on and so forth, I would say don't get swayed by those. There is a lot of, you need to dig a little deeper and you will see that whatever FCI was buying, let's say in Haryana, the procurement, earlier it was all in a register and now they put it on the computer and they show it as ENAM. Now that's not really ENAM. ENAM is when you start having interstate, interdistrict trade. Now, why do you go to Amazon when you want to buy, your cell phone or laptop or anything else. All the specifications are given, and you make the payment, and if the commodity that comes to you does not tally with the specifications that you had asked for, you have the right to return without any question. That gives you the confidence, right? Now in agriculture, the problem is there is no assaying, there are no proper grading, whether this mango is A grade, B grade, C grade, and what will be shown on the computer and what is delivered in your house can be two different animals. Now, where do you go for dispute settlement there? So it has to start with the basics, that you have to show that there is a grading properly and there is a dispute resolution mechanism, and somebody certifies that this is the quality that is being sent. Because you cannot, if I'm buying something from Bangalore or Karnataka and it comes after 3 days here and I don't like that, can I return that? Will it go to Karnataka? By the time it will be finished, the quality will be gone. So I think it will take a little more time, but there are many other platforms that will come besides ENAM. The private sector will be much smarter to spatially integrate agriculture markets. And this is where your investors, there is a huge scope for this. This is a fertile area, literally, I would say right now, waiting for investors to look into this. Over to you.
Right. Actually, a follow-up question, the same line is asked by our client Sonali Sonpal, where she's asking whether digitization and startups could actually be a helping hand in that front. And I think you've partly answered that already.
Sure. Digitization and startups, not only in agriculture, this is going to happen all over the economy in every sector.
True. I agree.
And in agriculture, quite a few startups have already come. Now, my normal thing is that most of the startups go towards production activities. How to do sprays through drones, accurate sprays of pesticides on the plants, or having sensors at what depth the seed has to be put in the soil, and what is the soil structure and how much NPK has to be released, and so on and so forth. There are somewhat less on the marketing side, connecting post-harvest activities. And my own submission is that, and understanding is that farmers suffer more on the marketing side in India than on the production side. He suffers on both sides, but the value, he loses more in the marketing than in the production part. So if there are investors in your community who are looking for where to invest, digitalization or startups, I would request them to look at the post-harvest, from warehouse receipt systems to ENAM type of electronic platforms to logistics, how best to minimize the cost of logistics, but ultimately goods have to move from one place to another. So spatial integration, but also temporal integration, I would say, that the future markets in India and the spot markets in India, whenever we talk of spatial integration, but future market is a part of the same basket of price, market risk hedging of the farmer. So we need to dovetail all this into a package of new order of agri-marketing, and 10 startups invest in that area.
Correct. Another one that Mr. Jigar is asking is with regard to the climate change. There's clearly a need to cut down on carbon emission by implementing efficient use of fertilizers, adopting zero tillage and management of water use in rice irrigation. Now, do you think that soil health card has actually helped in preventing the use of certain fertilizers, which probably could be good in terms of reducing the carbon emission medium term?
Yeah, there are 2-3 major things here. One, agriculture gets impacted by climate change in a big way. So how much losses are likely to be in the yields in the next 20 years, 30 years, as we look at the temperatures in the country. But the other is that agriculture also contributes about 22% to the greenhouse gas emissions in the country. And much of that comes from the livestock sector. You know, what has happened is the methane that is created in the unproductive cattle of India. This is one sector where the female is needed by the farmer, but the male is sent on the road because feeding him is a very expensive proposition. And I would say the Gram Panchayat lands and all that can be used for this and have solar panels in those gaushalas which can produce the extra electricity and feed it back to the grid. This will give them a regular income. But more important also, when these gaushalas, whether it is the bull or the bhansa or the unproductive cattle, their dung is very important. Our soils are very deficient in carbon, and we need to put that carbon in the soil. Going in the environment is bad, but putting back in the soil increases its productivity. So we have to organize our system in such a way that these cattle are not on the roads. They can be still productive, and you have to find out a regular income to run those gaushalas and others. So you need innovation and you need commitment. And I feel with that we can turn around and deal very much with this. The other, rice is another polluter of methane. It generates the ponding of rice fields. This year in Punjab, because labor was not there, Bihari labor had gone back, and they did what is called the direct seeding of rice. Now you can save 25% water in that. 25% of the area is under direct seeding, and there is a saving of water and accordingly lesser methane emission. So you can have policies and incentivize farmers towards that through technology or some other incentives, but we need to be focused towards that. Over to you.
Another question that I think is very pertinent to understand as far as the terms of trains of agriculture farmers is concerned is, at what land holding is the average Indian farmer profitable? And, how long do you think we could reach a tipping point to make this business profitable for, especially for small and marginal farmers?
The land holding size in India has been coming down. In 70, 71, it was 2.3 hectares. Today it is 1.08 hectare. And in the next 20 years, unless we shift massive labor force away from agriculture, our holding size is not going to improve. Now, 1 hectare cannot support a family of 6, right? Unless you are growing a very, very high value, some dragon fruit or grapes or something like that. Wheat and rice or cereals or pulses, they cannot support that. So much of the income also is coming from non-farm operations to the farmers. And but one thing I must say in favor of the smallholders, China's holding size is smaller than ours. When I started studying China in early 2000s, the average holding size was 0.46. Today, it is 0.75 or so. Because the labor went away and therefore average holding size started increasing, and they produce from a lesser overall agriculture area 3 times more than what India produces. So thinking that small I don't buy that, because seed is perfectly divisible, water is perfectly divisible, your fertilizer is perfectly divisible. It is how much price they get for their product and how much price they pay for their inputs. What is the profitability in agriculture? You know, China is using 400 kilograms of fertilizer consumption. Look at that. So productivity can be raised. That's not a big deal even on small holders. Marketing is a problem, and that is where aggregation is needed. Farmer producer organizations are basically a step in that direction.
Sure.
But land lease markets can be open and let the market do this. There was a study by Professor Joel and others that it requires at least 4 hectares of land to support a family of 5 or 6. You know, but that's not going to happen in India for the next 30 years.
Right. Okay. Another question Mr. Siddharth Acharya is asking, what does Deregulation of Essential Commodity Act, ECA, will do to the farm price realization?
You know, because of the Essential Commodities Act earlier, private sector was not upbeat in investing in storage facilities. So what was the result? Farmer would bring his produce immediately after the harvest. Everybody brings in the market, the prices crash. So at the time of immediately after the harvest, prices are the lowest. And then in the lean season, you would see the prices flaring up because there are no stocks in the system by the private sector. Only government could control wheat and rice, but other things, this is where the problem was. So now, when you are lifting the controls on Essential Commodity Act, more storage will be created, and hopefully this variation between immediate post-harvest prices and the lean season prices, that variation will reduce. And the consumers will gain at the end of the season. And if farmers can hold themselves, or warehouse receipt system can be developed, they can pay the storage costs if they are competitive and benefit from the off-season prices. So I feel this is in favor of the farmers' choices. How it will roll out, we'll have to see.
Another question is being asked by Ms. Namita Mohanka. She's asking that you were talking about the edible oil imports being very high. What do you think the government can do to increase the production back home, and what are the barriers in that front?
You know, our traditional oilseed complex is basically mustard, soya, groundnut, sesame, and all this. On an average, they can give you about 300 kilograms per hectare oil, given the level of productivity that we have in the country. Now, if you want 15 million tons of oil to be produced through these traditional oil seeds, you need 45 million hectares of additional area under oil seeds. That's not possible. The only crop which can give you almost 4 tons of oil per hectare, if you get the productivity levels right, is the oil palm. And oil palm we are importing from Malaysia and Indonesia, but experts in the government and oil palm research have identified that there are 2 million hectares where it can be grown in India. Now, if you get the productivity levels right, 4 tons which Malaysia or Indonesia get, then you can have the possibility of producing 8 million tons of oil. Now, what is holding it back? It's a long duration crop. There is a gestation lag of 6 years first, and then it gives fruit for the next 25 years, and then it has to be replanted. Now, an ordinary farmer cannot wait for 6 years without any returns. So, at present, corporates cannot enter because this is called a horticulture crop. Corporates can enter into tea and coffee because they are plantation crops. So corporates are allowed in plantation crops, not in horticulture crops. So the first thing that has to be done is change the categorization of this from horticulture to a sort of a plantation crop. And because corporates can easily bear 6 years of gestation lag and look for a longer term horizon. If the farmers have to do it, then you have to give a lot of subsidy, because when they are growing and they are not getting anything, how will they survive? So you have to give the opportunity cost of land, what they were getting, let us say, from rice, that much for the first 3, 5 years, 6 years. Otherwise, it will not fly. So that's where we are stuck.
Sure. Another thing that I wanted to ask was with regard to the penetration of formal credit in the sector. It continues to, actually fall over the last 5, 6 years. We've actually seen the institutional credit falling, especially with the bank NPAs increasing and banks getting more risk averse. And I think what is the way out of that? Because institutional credit is important for the farm sector to get more formalized in nature and contribute more to the value out of the economy. So I think, how do you think that they can improve improve the penetration of sector overall in terms of credit offtake?
Any agri-value chain you are going to set up, all the way from seed to the final selling to the consumer, will require financing of the activities. Now, if you look at from where we started in 1947, when only 10% was the institutional credit and 90% was informal credit at rates ranging from 24% to 48%. Now we have made a lot of progress. Everybody criticizes, nowadays nationalization of banks in '69. But one of the objectives of that was to ensure priority sector lending to agriculture. Now, we did make major inroads and major improvement in terms of institutional finance going to agriculture. In fact, there are many states where I can give you the names of those states. The agriculture loans taken are 200%, 300%, 400% more than the value of agriculture inputs in that sector. So they are taking in the name of agriculture and diverting these loans because you get at 7% or 4% interest subvention, and you become a money lender actually. You take 3 lakhs from the at 7% or 4%, and then you can give it at 14%, 15%. There is enough arbitrage that you can have. So there are many states, particularly in the south, starting Kerala and Tamil Nadu and all that, against gold loans. This is one misuse of so-called priority sector lending agriculture. But then there are other states which are heavily dependent on the informal sector. And that's where the rates are very, very high.
True.
Microfinance institutions, 4% now. And you and me buy our flat or our car at interest rate of 20%, and you're asking the poor farmer to borrow at 20% from microfinance institutions because their costs are high. I think we have to get a handle on this, and NABARD has to take a lead and flush the liquidity in the system so that farmers can get at 7%, 6%, 5% interest, and all the informal has to be displaced, and that's the collateral, issue of collateral security that has to be given, whether it is a joint or others. So some innovations are needed on that front. We have not reached our target yet, and there is a big challenge for NABARD and RBI on that front.
Okay, so a general question that I would like to ask you here is, has average Indian farmer changed? What is do you see the improvement in that trend in terms of, how the average farmer has actually evolved in the past 50 years? How do you really see them understanding the sector now vis-a-vis what it was, say, 50 years ago? Or do you think the farmer is more educated, more mechanized, more connected?
The mechanization definitely has increased, the liquidity has increased, the fertilizer consumption has increased, modern inputs of seeds have increased. So agriculture has changed significantly from what we were in mid-60s called the ship-to-mouth economy. Today, we don't know where to keep our stocks. This is the most dramatic turnaround in agriculture. But your question is how far the farmer has gained. And the problem is, if the family size, in UP, the family size is 6. You know, when China started off its reforms in 78, they started off with agriculture, but in 79, they put the one-child norm. So that was the policy. Their family size today is 3. Our family size in a state like UP is 6. So whatever you produce in agriculture, if you have large family and over a period of time, the holdings are being subdivided in the family, then 1 hectare cannot take care of all the 6 people. Let it be very clear. So those who have moved out, Punjab was the first one. And those people from agriculture started moving out and they went to dhabas or drivers or outside Canada or London or Australia. They started moving out. And today, in fact, of the workforce, Punjab has only 26% of the workforce in agriculture, whereas the country has 42%. And Bihar and UP are, at 48, 49%. So I think we have to make people move out of agriculture. That's the pace of development and the direction of development. We have to create conducive environment if we want to increase farmers' income.
Thank you so much for your lovely insights. I think we are now nearing the end of the session. Truly, there's much more than what meets the eye when it comes to a sector. As you rightly said, that the near-term dynamics are indeed hinting at silver lining in the agri sector and the rural sector. In the current gloomy state, as you rightly mentioned, there are so-called activity and demand indicators which are looking pretty healthy at this point in time, be it agriculture output for resales, tractor sales, consumer non-durables, agri output overall. And more importantly, it's all coming from a point where in the last 4-5 years have been pretty negative terms of trends as far as the agriculture sector is concerned, which lately have sort of reversed since mid of last year. But as you rightly said, we still need to work upon the structural issues pertaining to the growth contribution, pertaining to the agri R&D, capex, productivity, and lucrativity for the farmers to be in the sector. Plus, of course, continue to maintain traction in the reform segment. I think we are hoping that over the next 5 to 10 years, we would hopefully see the farm income actually double. And more important, more than the income bit, the productivity of land and labor, I think should be the big focus for the next 5 to 10 years for the government. With this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you, sir, for your insightful ideas and thoughts. Take care, everyone, and stay healthy. Ciao.
Thank you very much, Madhvi, for having me, and I hope the investors find it useful. If there are any other thoughts, please feel free to get back.
Sure.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.